in, where were we? In Newport News, Virginia, and chat all about the Port of Alaska. So really happy to be here. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm gonna breeze through quite a few of my slides, but happy to answer any questions at the end. I'll start by saying that I have a little agenda. So I'll introduce myself, tell you a little bit about me, talk about the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Maritime Administration, which is part of USDOT, which is where I work. And then my job, I'll explain what the heck I do, and talk at the end about federal infrastructure assistance. So a little bit about me. My name's Catherine Simons. I am based in Seattle, Washington. I've been here for just about a year. Prior to Seattle, I lived in Washington, D.C. for about 7 years and a variety of different places before that. I'm originally from Wisconsin, from a little farm town, and went to high school in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I am no stranger to winter. And then spent some time in East Africa and Tanzania doing different types of transportation work. So really happy to be back at USDOT. I'm a former employee who left for a couple years. So I worked previously for the Maritime Administration doing congressional and legislative affairs, as well as the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. And I also have some experience working for the U.S. Navy and a variety of different roles. I think that pretty much highlights my background. So really happy to be back here at MARAD. It's an exciting position, a very unique one within the federal government. I'm a team of one. So as I move through the presentation, you'll start to see that there is way more than really one person can do. So my job is to try and keep the train on the tracks and balance my time as I can. So sometimes I'm stretched pretty thin, but I do very much look forward to interacting with all of you and colleagues in Alaska. And next month in September, I'll be visiting a couple of Alaskan cities. I'll be in Ketchikan for the Southeast Conference, and then a couple weeks later up in Nome for the AAHPA, the Alaskan Association of Harbor Masters and Port Executives, administrators. I think the last word's administrators. So I'll move right into USDOT. I know there's a lot of state DOT people on the call, or I saw you in the chat. So likely you're aware of the difference. USDOT is headquartered in Washington, D.C. It's a cabinet level agency. Our leadership is currently Secretary Pete Buttigieg. So he's my boss's boss all the way at the top. These are pictures of USDOT headquarters where I used to work in Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., a lovely part of town. And there's our mission statement. So USDOT is broken up into administrations. They used to be called modes. They were called operating administrations for a while. But here's the laundry list. You're likely familiar with some of the big ones like FAA. They are by far the largest. Federal Highways, Federal Railroad Administration, and down there at the bottom, that's the Maritime Administration, or MARAD, and that's where I work. This will become relevant later on in the conversation when we talk about the different funding opportunities. Some of the grant programs are through the Office of the Secretary up there at the top, and others are based within the modes themselves. So anything that has to do with the Maritime Administration, that's my bread and butter. That's where I live and work. But we work closely on intermodal transportation with our many fellow administrations. So I'm happy always to connect any stakeholders with the appropriate points of contact. Here's the slide to talk about the Maritime Administration. There's our logo in the top right. Established in 1950, approximately 800 employees, most of whom are in DC, except for lucky folks like me who get to be out in the fields. And then there's a list there of some of the main lines of effort. It's pretty unique, MARAD's programs. They're very diverse, encompassing all sorts of different facets of maritime transportation. So I'm going to talk, of course, more about that. And here's a picture of our leadership. The maritime administrator is retired Navy Admiral Ann Phillips. So I'm just going to highlight some of the different lines of effort, the economic security and maritime trade portion. Some things that might be of interest to this group would be the port conveyance program, where MARAD can help if a port or a public entity would be interested in trying to acquire federal land that other agencies are trying to transfer. That's something that we were involved in. Cargo preference, deep water port licensing program. So as you've likely gathered, MARAD is the Maritime Administration. We deal with waterborne transportation. Of course, strong intermodal connections, so there is some crossover there, but everything that I'm talking about has some kind of direct link to maritime transportation. The federal grant assistance piece, that's my main charge, is to be doing outreach around those federal grants that MARAD owns. Moving down to the national security and emergency response, MARAD has a number of activities in this category, including that I'm going to show on the next slide too, but there's a number of ships that are based around the country. There's 2 here in Tacoma, Washington, that MARAD owns, and around the country that help do a variety of different things, including emergency response, which is a big deal down in the Gulf in advance of large hurricanes and things like that. But they are in a ready reserve state. They do regular military outloads, and Steve certainly knows quite a bit about the Strategic Sealift program. Sorry, the Strategic Seaport program, rather. Here's a picture of our strategic seaports. This is the DoD program that MARAD plays a large role in. All of these ports have a partnership to be in a support role for military outloads in case of emergency or national defense needs. So that's an interesting partnership, a different conversation for a different day, but something to be aware of. And of course, Port of Alaska is one of those ports. The environmental program that MARAD does is quite interesting. I've had the chance to learn more about that. It's quite diverse. It's expanding. I should probably mention that DOT and MARAD in particular has had a large plus up through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so lots of expansion going on, hiring to be able to increase capacities, both for the grants, but also for things like this META program. Some interesting things specifically around liquefied natural gas and batteries, etc. So just wanted to highlight that is part of what MARAD does. And then the Maritime Academies. MARAD operates the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which is located in Kings Point, New York. My sister's a graduate of USMMA, so I'm always happy to chat more about that. There's a number of state maritime academies, and we're always trying to spread the word about these types of education opportunities at the college level, as well as the K-12 programs around the country. And then wanted to highlight there's the Centers of Excellence that MARAD is currently has on the street for applications. It's currently just a designation. There's no dollars attached to it. That's hopefully something coming in the future, but there is an application process that's open now that closes next month, September 19th. Happy to answer any questions, like I said, about. I'm just throwing a lot at you. So now I'm going to move into my job. That was the overview of DOT, of the Maritime Administration. So one of the very cool things that MARAD does has, like I said, most people are based in DC, but then we've got ships around the country, and there's also a couple of us, there's 10 of us, Gateway Directors are our titles, and we're based in these regions that MARAD has designated. So we are Gateway offices, but we're teams of one. So there's me up in the top left-hand corner, Seattle. So my region is Alaska, Washington, and Oregon. My colleague Gus is down in LA, Long Beach area. I have a new colleague, actually, this slide hasn't been updated yet, but Travis Black, who's going to be in St. Louis. And then you can see that folks are spread around the country. And trying to remember. Oh yeah, so our role, the idea is to be both a conduit of information back to DC to inform our leadership of what's going on in the region. The main part, though, is to be helping spread information about federal funding opportunities and variety of federal support to partners, to stakeholders in the region. So here's a little bit about my territory. As I already talked about Alaska, of course. I put these slides together earlier today. So this is a variety of the best photos I could find to highlight the seaports. Still working. I think I can find better ones, but this is like what I could find today. So you can see that there are a lot of ports. It is my endeavor to try and reach most, if not all, port directors. Certainly that's a long list, I'll say, but had the opportunity, like I said, to connect with Steve, the Port of Alaska, and then a variety of different directors around the state, and looking forward to meeting lots more in Nome next month. Wanted to move now into the last section, the final section of this, which is probably the good stuff. This is the federal infrastructure assistance section of my presentation. There's some links embedded in this, and I'm happy to share my slides. The DOT Navigator is a fairly new tool. I actually didn't know about it until I was on the website earlier today. There's a lot of DOT is an active agency, lots of useful tools, and they're putting out new ones all the time. So this is a tool that I was just made aware of. This is a hyperlink in there. But if you go on to this, if you follow the link to the DOT website, there are a variety of different ways to search for different types of funding opportunities for DOT at large. And they're tailored based on who you are, what the stakeholder is. So I was interested to see there's a specific landing page for tribal users and state DOTs and et cetera. So I would encourage you to check out DOT Navigator. You can always just Google it too. I'm going to talk about MARAD grant opportunities, which includes the Port Infrastructure Development Program, America's Marine Highway Program, small shipyard grants. Those are the ones that, as I mentioned earlier, that MARAD owns in giant quotes. MARAD runs them, administers those grant programs. And then there's the larger US DOT programs like MEGA and RAISE, and I'll talk more about those. And then just some resources at the end about other toolkits and federal funding handbooks, that one in particular that I've worked on in a previous role that I had, that if you're not aware of, I'd be very excited to share with you. So here's some more information about the MARAD grant programs. This is really in the weeds. Some people on this call know plenty about this already. I'm not going to belabor the point, but there's a variety. There's 3 main programs for ports that MARAD administers. They're listed here: the PIDP, the America's Marine Highway Program, not to be confused with Alaska Marine Highway Program, and the small shipyard grants, and then a variety of smaller programs down at the bottom. Our notice of funding opportunity cycle is pretty consistent. The NOFOs, those notice of funding opportunities, are released in the spring or late winter, we'll say, usually in February or March, and then they're due 60 days later. This past year, in fiscal year 2022, there were some amendments, and so those deadlines were pushed back into June for some of the programs. But I let all my stakeholders know that for those folks who are interested in applying, it's never too soon to start looking. All of the past NOFOs are listed on the website, and always feel free to, you or anybody you know can email me, and I'm happy to provide all the links and talk you through, answer any questions. That's part of my job. And importantly, to connect you with the program offices back in DC who can help talk about specifics of the programs. And there is a bit of a timing that's associated with this, which is that once those NOFOs hit the streets, once they're published, then the program offices are limited in the types of questions that they can answer. So it behooves folks who are interested in applying to come early with their questions before those NOFOs are published, and we can set up meetings and we can talk through, brainstorming what is eligible, what isn't, and some of the nitty-gritty. Here, I'm going to just share a little bit more about the the America's Marine Highway Program. It's a 3-part program that is broken into, actually, I'm going to go back a slide. In the second item down there, you can see it says a 3-step program. There's a route designation, a project designation, and the grant portion. So this is a bit of a tricky project or program rather, but certainly a good one, and one that that several stakeholders in Alaska are well informed on. Oh, I should also mention that we are expecting grant announcements any day now. They're announced in the fall, so it could be in August, or September really is the latest. So you'll likely start to hear in the news, and hopefully some celebrations for Alaskans about these upcoming grant funding awards. So this is a map of the America's Marine Highway routes. You can see Alaska is down there in the bottom left. They are working to expand the routes, and I look forward to celebrating when that is accomplished, but that is up in the Secretary's office for approval, and so we're just waiting on that decision to be announced. I'm just gonna skip this in the interest of time. Just know that there's plenty here to dig into. Here's some of the US DOT infrastructure grant programs. So these are not administered by MARAD, but might be of interest. Some of these live in our other sister administrations, such as the FRA and FTA and FHWA down at the bottom. There was the ferry boat program announced a couple days ago, and there were some awards of formula funding for, excuse me, for Alaska, including the Alaska Marine Highway had a large award. And then I'm wrapping up here. Just wanted to make you aware of some toolkits. This is a toolkit that's in print, but it's also available online. Lots more about investments. And then here's the federal funding handbook that I worked on a few jobs ago. I was a contractor I actually worked for Bowhead at the time, which is a UIC subsidiary based out of Utqiagvik. So I was based in DC, but working as a Bowhead employee. And this was one of the products that I did when I worked for the Committee on the Marine Transportation System. This is a large document that exists on the web. I'm happy to share the link, of course. You can also just Google it, but it was updated in March 2022, and it's a mega list of all of the federal funding opportunities, very wide reaching, that relate to the marine transportation system, excuse me. So really broad, sort of to be all encompassing, and you can do keyword searches and things like that to find things of interest. And I think I'm almost done. This is my second to last slide. I recently learned about this upcoming event. Hopefully you're all aware of it. It is scheduled for September 7th in Anchorage, an infrastructure grant symposium hosted by Senator Murkowski and the Alaska Municipal League. So unfortunately, I will not be able to be there in person, but hope that everyone can take advantage of that, and I look forward to answering any further questions. And with that, I'm done. There's my email address, my phone number. I'm on LinkedIn, and happy to take any questions at this time. Turn my camera back on. What you got? Anybody have any questions? Steve, do you have any critiques?
Do I raise a hand here? Are you going to be sticking around for the duration of this committee meeting? That this project that we're reviewing later on has got so much intermodal features going to it. It's got freight, rail, it's the ports involved with it, and we even got a pedestrian kicker on it as far as being able to be qualified for certain grants and things of that nature. So I'd love if you could stick around and watch the rest of the presentation.
Sure, yeah, I can do that.
All right, without any other questions or comments, we can move on to part B in our business items, the Ocean Dock Road Reconnaissance Engineering Study, presentation by Kinney Engineering. Who do we have from Kinney here? There you are. That's Galen. You're on mute, sir.
Still can't hear you, Galen. All right, so yeah, we have Jeannie and Joanne. So my name's Galen Jones. I'm a project manager with the Alaska Department of Transportation. Again, here with Jeannie and Joanne from Kinney Engineering, and we're here to present the draft Ocean Dock Road Reconnaissance Engineering Study. So since we introduced the team and the study goals to you last summer, we've had a lot of meaningful interaction with stakeholders, which has enabled the team to dive into the problems, potential solutions, their costs, and the impacts along Ocean Dock Road and within the Port of Alaska. So without further ado, I will hand things over to Jeannie and Joanne. Thanks.
Thank you, Galen. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah,
Okay.
looks
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. I feel like Joe really hyped up our project, so I'm kind of excited. So here's our project team. Galen just introduced himself. Joanne's on the call as well. Isa Miguel is a engineer who's been working on the project from Fairbanks, and Don McCammon's also on the call. He's our rail engineer. So let's get into what is the project and where are we at? What are we doing? So I wanted to remind everybody, and I guess I better say I can't see the teams right now. So Joanne or Isa, if somebody's like trying to jump in and ask a question, stop me and we can do that.
Yeah, Jeannie, I can keep track of that too.
Oh,
So
perfect.
yeah, no worries.
Thank you. All right, so where is the study? The study is Ocean Dock Road, heading into the Port of Alaska. From, let me get, okay, so from Whitney Road, kind of Ship Creek, and then it goes north into the port, and kind of to where the rail and the roads stop interacting with each other. And we did a study a few years ago of just this intersection that's marked with an X, and had some ideas for improvements and a recommendation, but kind of realized that in order to really gain all of the improvements that we wanted to get to, we needed to look bigger so that we could look at how the rail interacts with the road a little bit better in this area. So, so then we started this recon study, and basically what we're trying to do is get information so decision makers can program improvements for the area. So we identified purpose and need of the project. We looked kind of at a high level at all of the possible solutions, and then we analyzed it a little bit more in depth. What are the feasible solutions here? So we have identified kind of 6 elements of purpose and need. We looked at data and plans. We did a field visit. Many of you attended, and then also lots of different folks from DOT and MOA also attended. And we had one-on-ones with port tenants kind of to establish what are all of the issues out here that we can look to solve. The big one is the delay at the railroad crossings. So we're looking to remove the crossings or find other ways to reduce delay both to the trains and to the vehicles at those crossings. We're looking at addressing issues that we heard from truck drivers about truck operations, safety and operational kind of concerns. We're looking to reduce the potential for crashes. There's not been a ton of crashes in this area, but one crash could have a really big impact. So we definitely want to reduce the potential for crashes. And we've got some improvements to Whitney Road that we're looking at that would help us with that. Improvements around the turn around Government Hill Bluff. And then if there are fewer crossings, there's less potential for crashes. So also looking, even though this is a very industrialized area, it also has a lot of demand for non-motorized travel. And so looking at infrastructure for non-motorized users, making it visible. In terms of maintenance, one of the big things is if there's less opportunities for vehicles to hit rail equipment, then there's less maintenance that has to happen. And then drainage kind of plays a role in maintenance as well. Improved drainage reduces the need for maintaining the rail and the road. So that's what we identified as purpose and need. So back in March, we finished our conceptual study, which identified those purpose and need elements. And we also looked in each of these 4 areas that I'm showing on the screen for what are the options that we have, what concepts could we come up with that would improve those areas identified in purpose and need. What engineering alternatives are there out there in these areas? So the non-motorized options, looking at how to improve the drainage. We had 4 different concepts for how the rail could be reconfigured to improve the area. And then we had also 4 different road concepts for how the road could interact with the rail. We had a technical advisory council meeting in March. And then we kind of did this high level, how well does each option meet purpose and need? And from that, and from the comments from the technical advisory committee, we said, okay, here's kind of the best alternative, or the best alternatives pieced together. And that made the build alternative that we looked at in this draft reconnaissance study that we just finished. So this is an overview of the whole project, and I'm going to get into closer details so you can really see what we're talking about. Just to kind of orient you to the figures as we go through them. The road, where there's changes to the road, it's kind of a darker color. It's not the background aerial, and you can see the pavement markings a little more clearly. The green railroad, like the green highlight on the railroad is railroad that would be removed. And then the yellow highlight with red track is new railroad. So we're moving kind of, in general, the gist of this is moving the track that runs into the port from the east side of the road to the west side of the road. In this picture, north is up, or north is to the right. So moving the railroad to the other side of the road to decrease the number of times trucks and trains are interacting with each other on the road. And then we've got pedestrian pathway connections, and we're also reconfiguring Whitney Road, which I'll go into the close-ups of each of these areas so we can look at the improvements a little bit more that we're proposing. All right, so this is the very south end of the project. Ship Creek is running east-west along the bottom of the figure, and north is pointing up. So one of the main things that we're proposing for this section at the far south is to reconfigure this intersection between Ocean Dock Road and Whitney Road. Trucks mostly travel Ocean Dock Road to Whitney Road. There's very little traffic at all using North C Street. And right now there's a lot of stopping at this intersection and some confusion about who's stopping and who isn't, because the southbound traffic doesn't stop so that we don't have queues over the railroad tracks. So what we're proposing is to reconfigure that so the main movement goes straight and doesn't stop. And it's clear that the North C Street traffic, which is the lower volume traffic, it's less likely to be large trucks, that they have a clear stop sign and know they're supposed to stop. There's also, it's been tight turns as you turn from Whitney onto Ocean Dock Road, and that eliminates that. So there will be less vehicle strikes of the rail equipment. And also when an oversized vehicle comes through this area now, the railroad has to come out and flag the crossings for that vehicle. And the idea is to eliminate that as well. The oversized trucks won't have to be flagged. The rail changes to the track that you see down here are all to accommodate the change in the road. There's nothing here specific to improve the rail, but it does have to move in order to accommodate this change to the road. Looking at the north side of this figure, this is the first like rail improvement that we see in these pictures. And we're taking this north leg of the passenger Y and moving it kind of southwest. And the idea, the reason for this movement is it puts the track closer to the rest of these crossings. So they'll be easier to signalize together. And then also it reduces the skew of the crossing at the road, which is a safety feature. Also, I wanted to highlight the pedestrian improvements that we're doing here. The light pink is existing pedestrian, like bridges and pathways and stuff. And then the purple would be new. So we would create an actual pathway that has more perpendicular crossings of the rail tracks and that has signed crossings. So people know where they're supposed to walk, they have a place to be, and where they're crossing the road, you can see them. All right, so that's the south side. I'll move a little bit further north. So still
Hey,
in this
Jeannie?
figure, yes.
Jeannie, I think there's a question.
Oh, yes.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. I'll lower my hand. Hey, does the railroad prefer those tracks being close? You mentioned that you can signalize the tracks being close together. Is that something they like, or is that something they don't like? They like that, I assume.
Yeah, Dawn, are you on? Could you?
Yes, the answer is yes. They do like it. It simplifies the signaling. It also simplifies the train operations as well. And one of the things that we did as Jeannie looks up north, and it's why this north leg of the passenger Y got moved, we moved all the road crossings out of that intersection area with Ocean Dock Road and C Street. So it's a much safer crossing area as well. So one of our goals was to combine the crossings as close as we could do, get it out of the C Street, Ocean Dock Road intersection area, and then get the passenger trains on the west side of the road so they're not blocking the traffic as much as they are now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for watching that for me. All right, so yeah, as Dawn said, this is where you can really see the track. So we're taking out this green track and moving it to the west side of the road. And I think that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dawn, but I think this movement also helps set it up for this moving the track to the other side of the road.
Yes, Jeannie.
Okay. And this crossing here is the existing crossing here of the tracks across Ocean Dock Road, has the highest number of trucks and the highest number of trains of any of these crossings. So being able to get rid of this crossing is a big improvement in delay, just really makes a very big improvement. And it also gets it out of this curve, which is kind of a safety related problem where truck drivers talk about having some difficulty seeing around the curve as they come, that kind of thing. So that crossing is like the big hooray. And then also what you're seeing here in terms of changes to the intersection and to drainage. These are changes that were proposed in that previous reconnaissance study of the intersection, and these fit well with these new improvements that we're suggesting. So they've kind of been melded together and can show how the pedestrian accommodations continue, basically connecting this new pathway on the east side of Ocean Dock Road up to the existing pedestrian pathway that goes up to Government Hill and then across to downtown. And then coming into the port, this would be a wide shoulder. So pedestrians and bikes would be accommodated with a wide shoulder. Moving further north. So now I've turned your view, so north is to the right again. The big change here is just we're moving the tracks to the other side of the road, and actually the road has to shift to the east in order to accommodate the tracks fitting in on the west side. There's,
Jeannie,
go ahead.
we've got another question. I don't know if that was on the previous slide or if it's on this one. It was
Yeah,
Jimmy.
Jimmy Doyle with Weaver Brothers. Can you go back, Jeannie, to the previous slide real quick?
Yep.
So what I see is a pedestrian crossing at, so to speak, the bottom of the C Street ramp. Right there. Yeah, that's a pedestrian crossing. I can tell you, you know, you've got trucks coming over that ramp at 35 miles an hour. They're focused on that intersection. There's a three-way intersection. They're focused on a lot of things. Looking for a pedestrian to cross in front of them is not going to be easy at all. And in the wintertime, you definitely could have, you know, somebody decides to walk across right there and it's slick. You could have a truck out of control. And I'll go to the other side of the street where you're heading out of the port up C Street ramp. Those guys come around the corner. They are increasing their speed. They, you know, from 20 miles an hour to 25 to 30, they are not thinking about somebody stopping right in front of them or stopping them coming to a stop right there at the bottom of that ramp. I see that as a safety. See that as a safety problem that's worse than what we already have.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Joe Michelle had his hand up.
While we have this figure pulled up, and I spoke a little bit with Brian Lindenmoot about this. Were there issues, or was there a decision made on how much of that bluff you could take off? I mean, I understand there's some historical houses up there and stuff like that, yeah, but in that area, was there debate or consideration on taking more of that bluff out just to increase the visibility?
So this alternative, was studied in the previous study, does push the bluff back. Yeah, so I didn't, but yeah, what it does is it kind of pushes everything back this way a little bit from where it is. So there's a new retaining wall, a fin drain, which would help with the drainage going on. And this curve has a larger radius. It becomes less tight of a curve, becomes bigger. We did kind of do a super high level look at the environmental, because there's Browns Point Park up here and some historic houses, and then it's being used as a there's a trail up here that's being used as a park as well. So that needs to be considered. It's one of the considerations that we will have to deal with as the project moves forward. Does that answer your question? I'm gonna say yes. Anything else while we're here? This is kind of a thanks for slowing me down.
So Jimmy Doyle has a question, Jeannie.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, then I keep looking at your blue section 2, the blue square 2, and I see that there's another crossing. Is that a crossing again? It'll go a little bit further up the hill, Jeannie. On the, yeah, right there. If that's a crossing again, if I'm understanding it, again, you've got a driver. He, so to speak, has his foot into it. He's increasing speed to go up the hill. Stopping on that would be very unsafe in the wintertime, and it would be even difficult in the summertime.
Yeah, this is the existing crossing, Jimmy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it is
So-
what's there now.
I've heard of no problem, so maybe it doesn't get used very often. Thank you.
Yeah, and the advantage of this one down here is like you said, this is trucks trying to speed up the hill. but this one this ramp goes to Government Hill, so it's not used as much. So this crossing, like, I fully understand your concerns. And I think this one's a little bit better, but
All right, thank you.
yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Okay,
It looked
anything
like that-
else?
I think Steve had a question, but I see he put his hand back down, so,
Not on this figure, on the next one.
okay. Okay,
Should we move to the next one, Steve?
Yeah, so could you recap, Jeannie, what you said about shifting the road?
Yes, so to move the tracks and fit them in on the west side, fit them in, there's this existing track that serves these businesses on the west side already. So to fit the track in on that side, the road has to shift east.
Okay, and why this is of interest to me is because right in the middle of that road right now is the entry checkpoint for the port. And it looks to me like that section of track that goes across, or appears to go across the road, the one to the right, goes right through it where it is now. So two things have to happen. You know, we have to relocate that building, and there are underground utilities that go to it. And I guess my ask is, how much advance notice are we going to get, and are we going to be paying for that ourselves? Because you're digging the road up, and we need to make sure we have a foundation for that security checkpoint, because we can't make it go away.
Yeah, you need it. Galen, I don't know if you can answer that better than me.
I would assume that as part of the project cost, the relocation for the security hut, utility relocations would all be included in the funding package we would need to get the project, which would be through grants or federal funding, local partners. But because it's, just based on the way I've seen things done in the past with projects, you know, when the road project is the reason for something, needing to move something that's already there, a structure, then the party that needs to be moved isn't on the line for having to pay for that. That's the way I've seen things done in the past. So I can't think of a reason why anything would be different for this particular project. And as far as notice goes, yeah, no problem. And as far as notice goes, I think you would get substantial notice because this is just a reconnaissance study. There still is going to be a design phase after this, after the money gets programmed for design. And then that will take at least a few years for design, the other sort of phases, right of way, utility coordination, before construction would even occur. So there's lots of time, and you would be a part of that process for sure. So
I appreciate that. And just in general, and I think maybe Joe and Jimmy could, will confirm, is if all that's being ground up and moved, it's going to be exciting for as long as that's going to take, because that's the only way in and out of the port. And so there'll be a lot of coordination required, or you confine the construction to days that aren't ship days, which won't eliminate the truck traffic, but will minimize it to the greatest extent possible. So yeah, I can't wait to sit down and have the conversation about how we're going to choreograph this and not kill each other.
yeah, those are also really good points, and we're going to make sure to include that type of information in this reconnaissance study, because construction phasing, impacts during construction are all a huge part of it.
And for what it's worth, you see that annotation for East Bluff Road. Yeah, that's the alternate way in and out of the port right now. So that's of no value as Plan B. So so we'll have to chat.
Absolutely.
so Catherine Hensley had a question. Go ahead, Catherine.
think it's along the same vein. There is a Way in Motion down there. Has the location of that already been taken into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, not, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I know it's there.
Yeah,
and-
it's actually not too far from the same problem Steve has with the group. I highly recommend, if you haven't reached out to Lisa Idel Sassy with the WIM program, she would be a great point of contact. I know that the MSCVC group uses the data from this port. It's one of our most comprehensive technology-wise, and if they needed to be relocated, it's not as simple as just moving the concrete pad and the information. There's a whole infrastructure in place in that location that's going to have to be considered.
Thank you.
So less a question, more of a, don't forget about that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna move on unless I hear otherwise. So this is the north end. Moving the tracks to the west side eliminates this crossing here as well. And this has been identified by the port and the railroad, DOT. They've been out there looking at this crossing and trying to kind of end up with a short-term fix for safety concerns at this crossing. So this would completely eliminate the rail in that curve and help with all of that. The rail comes back across Ocean Dock Road over here with fewer trains. And also, like, sight distance is really good here. We don't have a building blocking the view of the train as it's coming and the trucks. And then we're also showing like driveway changes, like moving the rail means we have to deal with a lot of pieces of driveway and road and stuff. And that is essentially all of the improvements. There's some pedestrian infrastructure out here, which we would also meet with. So that's essentially all of the improvement that's proposed. I think you all have been doing a fantastic job of helping us identify sort of like the challenges and constraints that we need to overcome. And I've listed here ones that we've identified. So right away, this is mostly railroad, kind of Muni, Port of Alaska land, but we definitely want to minimize impacts to leasable land. Utilities coordination is huge. We don't have the WIM on this list. I will add it. But we know there's underground gas, fuel, telephone, water, sanitary sewer, and overhead electric in the corridor. And we've been told to expect that we'll find all kinds of things as soon as we start looking in the ground here. So we know to expect the unknown. I mentioned the parkland and the historic properties that will have to handle mitigation for those, or trying to eliminate or reduce impacts to them. And then you guys identified the traffic control problem. Yeah, Bluff Drive might be useful for some of it, but not all of it. Definitely we need C Street or Whitney Road to remain open at all times. And obviously the road into the port needs to remain open at all times. So what happens next? We've had the draft study out. DOT agency folks have looked at it, and MOA folks, and this Freight Advisory Committee. You've all had a chance to look at it. We're doing presentations to AMETS committees this month. And we intend to have the draft study out for public review beginning the end of August for a 30-day review. We'll definitely be sending it back to you all and asking you to forward it to, you know, your constituent groups, employees and business owners, and anybody who might be impacted, so that we can get a good amount of comments. When the public comment period ends, we'll do revisions to the studies. That'll be around the end of September, so that we'll finalize the study in October. And then it goes on to programming and funding the improvements. And our cost estimate right now is 40 million.
Jeannie, there's a question from Doug Thompson.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeannie, you went back and one of the slides had different roads to remain open at all times. And I wanted to make sure you knew, or somebody's told you, the tour companies, the cruise lines, they have rail operations down in that rail yard there. And as you're coming off of Christensen or you're coming down from the Hilton and you make the right before you get to the port turns, there's a right-hand turn like you're going into the Alaska Railroad freight shed. You spin around, you cross one of those tracks that's going to be removed. That's a 24-hour-a-day access point for employees and operations from April through September. Is that one of the roads that's it's hard to? I studied this and looking at it from the top. I'm so used to looking at it from the roadside, right, driving up, but. Are you familiar with the little road, access road I'm talking about? The railroad drives down that road all the time. There's a track on there. They have access. There's the old flour mill down that street, down the road on the very far end, past the tour company. It's Alaska Railroad land leased to us. And I can show this to you on another call. We don't have to take up everybody's time, but I'm curious about everybody wants their road open all the time. I realize that, but that's a biggie for the cruise lines. They need to have access to those train cars every day, 7 days a week, all summer and most of the winter, right? So, and 24 hours a day with people coming in and out and vendors and contractors, they're maintaining those cars in the middle of the night and they're running them, all day long. So I could talk to you about this privately. You can email me. We can go over it again, but I just want to make sure that somebody told you that there's a couple of those roads, there's really no way in or out other than that little access road, right? So sure, maybe you're familiar with that, I hope. Thank you.
Well, I'll definitely be getting in touch with you about that.
Okay.
So I make sure we capture it.
We very much appreciate that. The goal was never to shut down any of the access roads, but if we moved a crossing out, it actually made the access road more usable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have. Visit our website. We'll have, once the public comment period opens, we'll have this study on the website, and some shorter versions. We'll have this presentation so that people who don't want to spend time to get through that whole study can get the gist of it in a shorter bit. Contact Galen or Joanne and I with any questions. And yeah, if there's anything else, I can.
Quick question on my side, and then we'll get into some comments or when the questions are done. How far down Whitney Road did you guys look? In all your comments and things of that nature, I know it was outside the scope of the project, but in all the different people you talked to, was there any feedback in regards to issues with Whitney Road?
I didn't hear anything other than that the intersection of Whitney with Ocean Dock Road. Maybe because I was real clear about, maybe we were too clear about the study limits, but I didn't hear anything once you were past the intersection.
Thank you. All right, is there any feedback that anybody wants to kind of put on the record or anything like that in regards to the presentation that we just heard? Ms. Simmons, if you're still on the line, is there anything that strikes you as something that we might start looking down the road and applying for grants on the water side thing, even though this is on dirt?
Yeah, thanks. I'm still here and I was crosswalking the diagrams that you were showing with my Google Maps to try and understand. Really appreciated the thoughts about the trucks going up the hill, needing that momentum. And Steve, I think I saw where you're talking about with the ports, but I'm a first timer here, so trying to get it. I was in Anchorage once, but I wasn't looking at the port on my visit. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about the plans for funding and which grants you're planning to target, if any, at this time. Thanks.
We and I'm going to kind of lean on James Starzak in a second here, but we just in the last year, we've, started learning about competitive grants and learning how it leans towards intermodal transport and things of that nature. And I've just started digging into it. James is much more of an expert, but the thing's only a year old. So I was more asking, don't want to pin you down on it, but I mean, it doesn't get much more intermodal than that. Do you think that it's worth me starting to bang my head against the federal funding handbook for marine transportation? Or should I just stick with the other DOT competitive grant areas?
Well, it would definitely be probably a question for Steve as much as for me, because there's already a number of grant programs that, let me back up. Generally, these are national programs, obviously. So the way that they're distributed is generally, it's spread across the country. So you wouldn't want to apply against yourself is what I'm trying to say. So coordinating which programs you want to apply for with Steve to talk about what they've already got planned, whether or not you want to tie them into MARAD. I think that a better question would be looking at probably some of the RAISE and MEGA programs. But in order to understand that, I'd need to know how much you're looking like. You'd have to have a match. So we need to talk some round numbers around what this would look like. Could certainly lead some additional conversations around this. Or let me see if there's any other thoughts I wanted to share. Let me ask you this. Do you have grant writers on staff? Is this something you'd be contracting out? How far down this? Have you ever applied for a federal grant before? How'd it go?
I would have to go to the Central Region Planning Division on that answer. James, if you're available at all to interface with Ms. Simmons on that issue.
Yeah, certainly. When we had a round of applications for infra and was it the build grants that came through, or the mega grants? This grant application period that just closed about a month ago, DOT did organize a response and submitted a couple applications for those programs for some projects that had been given priority, but I don't believe anything in the port was even considered.
And this study hadn't come out yet.
Mhm.
And I wanted to keep you on the line, James, for just one more, comment. And that is, if, I guess two things, but I mean, this thing would get through design and then it would still have to compete with all the other projects in the STIP. Isn't that correct?
Well, STIP programming is a bit different than TIP programming, which is my wheelhouse. But generally speaking, yes. Often because of the planning, the timelines for project development, you'll have the design in a STIP, and then you'd have a line at the end of that STIP saying, construction in out years. And that's not programmed until that next STIP. Those out years are programmed. So, I mean, competing with other projects, once a federally funded project begins, we're generally in the camp of completing them. Otherwise, there's issues with them becoming non-participating. But getting them programmed is always a challenge.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot there. Does anybody have any other feedback or any comments just in general about the project or just about the Freight Advisory Committee? All right, in section 6, informational reports. Anybody have any informational reports? going into committee comments. This will be the last thing that we have before we announce it. John, do I need to pause for any I guess I should pause for 10 seconds, or do you know any members of the public that want to make any comments here?
Good question. I haven't seen anyone from the public that has wanted to participate. So I think the answer is no.
All right. As far as the freight aspect of it, I did want to bring one thing up. Is they reopened up the job. It just closed on the 8th of this month for Terry Boston's position at FMCSA. And I don't know if they were filled. This is the third time they've opened up that job. And they opened it up to the public now, not even federal employees. So they're having a lot of trouble trying to convince somebody to move up to Anchorage and take that FMCSA role. But if that thing opens up again, I'm gonna start shouting, loud and wide, because we got to take that opportunity to get that position filled. As far as just interfacing with FMCSA, it's a shame that we don't have somebody representing up here in Alaska. That being said, I'll take all the rest of the conversations offline. If anybody else has anything good for the committee, otherwise I'll bid you guys a good afternoon. Yeah, we'd love to have you, John. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Good
Thank
to see you,
everyone.
Catherine.
Thanks,
Yes,
everybody.
nice to meet you, Catherine.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody.
it.